For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. All right, episode number 19 of the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, rockin' and rollin'. Thanks so much for tuning in yet again. If you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. You can subscribe or follow wherever you are listening to this show at the moment. That'll help us out a lot, and it'll make sure that you get brand new stories of adventure to your podcast app automatically each and every week. Also, please tell a friend if you're liking the show. Pass along the Buffalo Roamer Podcast as a hot tip to a buddy or friend, and let them know that it's a cool show to check out. That'll help us out as well. And also, you feel free to reach out on Instagram at Buffalo Roamer, buffaloroamer.com, email buffaloroamer@yahoo.com. Reach out, give me a shout if you're listening to the podcast and enjoying it. Always like hearing from people about the podcast. All right, today on the show, Kory Kirby. Kory is an author. He's a book designer, a book publisher, and an adventurer of many different traits. In 2017, he did a 72-day biking/surfing trip down the west coast of the United States. Awesome trip. We talk a lot about that. And on that trip, he was traveling south asking the question, why do you exist? So we get into some of that in the podcast here as well. You can check him out online at Kory Kirby. That's Kory with a K, KoryKirby.com. On his Instagram at Kory with a K _Kirby. And also, if you are an adventurer and have a book that you'd like to publish, give Kory a shout out at his publishing company, Little Cabin Press. That is their specialty. So if you have something kicking in the back of your mind from some cool trip that you've done or whatever it may be, give him a shout at Little Cabin Press. All right, here you go. Kory Kirby on episode 19 of the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. Why don't you explain a little bit who Kory Kirby is, what you do, and kind of how adventure has played into your story, I guess.
Yeah, so just like you said, my name is Kory Kirby. I am a book designer by trade, and then I also help people publish books on top of that. And adventure has been kind of like a core value to me my whole life. And being a book designer, I am a freelancer, so I work for myself. And part of the reason why I wanted to work for myself was to keep adventure as a central into my day-to-day life as possible. And I always felt that if I had more control over my schedule, being self-employed, I could, be more adventurous, so to say. But my whole story started when I graduated college in the spring of 2017. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with like my career. I didn't know what I wanted to sink my teeth into. And so I did something that just was like completely out of my normal, out of my usual, just completely insane. I just wanted to like kind of rock my universe, so to say, and see what happened. And I wanted to do something that felt really aligned to me. And one of my dreams was always to learn to surf. I grew up skateboarding in Minnesota, but I never surfed. So I was like, okay, I'm going to attach a surfboard behind my bicycle, and then I'm going to try to ride from the most northwest corner of Washington down to the Mexico border. And the entire time I'm by myself, I'm just going to teach myself how to surf. I'm just going to devote 3 months to this.
Awesome.
And that way I know, like, I did this thing, and
right.
And out of that adventure popped up like my entire book design and publishing career out of just ruminating on what I want to do with my life. And I found kind of a purpose and something to sink my teeth into.
Awesome. And that's cool to hear. And I want to hear, how that journey unraveled. Cause I think it's awesome. But, how long was your trip from, you said the Olympic coast? Is that right?
Yeah. So I started up in the most northwest coast, most northwest corner in Washington, up at Cape Flattery, it's called. And I went all the way down to the Mexico border. So I did it in 72 days. Actually, it was 30 of those days I was riding my bike. And then the other 35 was me just hanging out, surfing and doing my thing. But the whole time, I never stayed in a hotel. I never did like an Airbnb or anything like that. I was totally camping and like more like lifting my bike up and like behind a tree and then just like falling asleep like in the side of the road because I was so tired. But that was the fun part of it is being able to sleep pretty much wherever and like having no plan.
Yeah, awesome.
Taking it.
Yeah, man, so cool. And so out of that, as you mentioned, has spawned kind of your track post big adventure, which I feel like is not rare, but I don't know. In talking with a bunch of adventurers and being one myself, oftentimes you go on these big trips with some sort of muse or like thinking of some sort of plan, and then you come away and you're like, well, that trip was freaking awesome, but I'm kind of in the same spot I was. So I'm curious how you avoided that and like the story that led you, through that adventure to where you're at.
Yeah. No, I love that. So we could talk so much about the actual adventure itself, and I could go way more into that. But to me, almost the good part is what happened after. And by no means did I like immediately figure it out, because I did return to kind of a similar spot in terms of like my bank account being drained and the fact that I needed to like make an income and all that, which is super stressful at the time in my life.
Sure.
But I actually, I needed a job like really bad. And I'm going to run through this. It might take a couple minutes.
No, take your time, man. We got all day.
All right, cool. I needed a job like super bad. So I am so blessed I had a college degree, but being a millennial with a college degree, but you have no experience, is I found it so hard to like get your foot in the door and start landing those first jobs, because even when you're applying to work, it's like you need like 6 years experience, like entry level jobs. They say that. And even, I could landscape for more money. So anyways, I was really struggled to get like my career and like my income rolling. So I actually started working in a snowboard factory, and I was working a night shift, minimum wage job. And it was not for me. Some people can really kind of get into the whole like using their hands and like crafting a board. But I really honestly, I like hated it. And I think the biggest part is the night shift was hard. I think if I had different like hours, but it was from 2:30. Yeah, 2:30 to 3 a.m. And that was bad. Like that was one of like the darkest moments in my life, was like working that job. And the whole time I was like working there, I was applying. As I said, I think I shot out like 60 resumes.
That's a job in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, like it's like I go to work, you get done, and then you're just like trying to find another job. So that's what I was doing. So I went from the snowboard factory, minimum wage, and I started working at a nonprofit, again, minimum wage style. But I started like enjoying that work, and that was more meaningful, and that was important to me. And the whole time in the back burner, like I would wake up at like 5 a.m. and I was like working on like my freelance business from like 5 to like 9 a.m. And then I'd go work like 9 to 5. And then I'd get off, and then I would just dive into it like 6 to like 11 o'clock. Like I was just grinding. Like 2017, I did this bike ride, and I like was on the beach and I was surfing. And that was amazing. Then 2018, I just like worked, like
awesome,
slaved away, and like had to put in my time. And then I was lucky enough too. Again, I was the whole time. Again, I'm applying to jobs more and more and more, as I'm always trying to like up my level a little bit.
Sure.
Financially, it's hard up there. I was living on credit cards Like I feel like we've all been there a little bit. And then I was lucky to get a job with Washington State University. And working for Washington State University, my background's in environmental science, so I'm really passionate about, protecting these places that I love to adventure in. And that's where I was actually able to have like more of a livable wage, up above the minimum. And so I started saving some money there for like the first time in my life. And I'm a very detailed individual, and I have like these Excel spreadsheets where I was tracking all of my expenses. And I was like, as soon as I hit 6 months expenses saved in my savings, just as you, I walked into the boss and I was just like, hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, this is my 2 weeks notice. Like, I'm out. And the whole reason I was working so hard for this is, it kind of mentioned in the front, is like, I wanted adventure, and I still do. I want adventure to be a part of like my day-to-day life. And I want to be able to like go do like a sweet bike ride in the morning and then start my work at like 11 if I feel like it.
Sure.
Or like I want to wake up at like 5 a.m. and like crush an 8-hour day and then like go surfing at like 3 until it gets dark. So the whole time, that's what like my vision was. So I left my full-time job, and that was one of the hardest, scariest, most like emotional time in my life, just like being really, really scared, because I had like I worked so hard to get a job that like allowed me to save money. I had like benefits. I had good benefits. I had like a good work environment. Like nothing about it was bad.
Right.
I felt like I could have, it wasn't like my community. I felt like I could have stayed there for like 5 years. So I left, and then I went and I lived in Mexico. Where I just dove into another adventure. It's like, as soon as I had like the money and the means, I was just like, okay,
I'm out.
Going to Mexico. I'm out. And I went to Mexico, and I just surfed a whole lot. And I was living with a group of other kind of like freelance creatives, work remote, like people, graphic designers, writers, and we all shared a house down there that we got for a month, and we just split the costs. And meeting up with these people was great, as they taught me a ton about how to make your own career that's actually viable and like supports you. I learned a lot, and I surfed a ton, and I was just loving, having more adventure in my life, because I did the bike ride that was sweet, and then I just worked my stinking ass off. And then I started like surfing again and having a ton of fun. And then since then, it's just been like a snowball effect of offering book design and publishing services. Like you do good work for one person, and then they tell their friend, and then they tell their friend, and it just slowly has grown into something that is like, just in the last 6 months starting to turn into like something that I'm really believing is like a full-time job and a career.
Awesome, man. That's great. And it's a cool story to have adventure tied into it as well. And man, I think one of the things that drew me to you and wanted to speak to you was just like your authenticity and like unapologetic like drive towards figuring out what makes you tick and then like going after it, which brings me to my next question, which is your first book, and correct me if I'm wrong there, which is Why Do I Exist, correct?
Yeah, well, I appreciate all the kind words there on the drive and the authenticity. That means so much to me. Just to hear that from like an outside perspective. So thanks, man. And so the book is Why Do You Exist? So much happens in that little story I did. I didn't even talk about that giant endeavor, but I got done with the bike ride, and the whole time I was working these other jobs, I was working on creating my book, Why Do You Exist? And so it's not why do I exist, it's why do you exist?
Okay, great.
And so when I was riding my bike down the coast, I had the surfboard that was essentially like a blank billboard. And I was
as you're towing it behind your bike as you're riding 70 days from Oregon or Washington, I should say, to Mexico, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you can picture a bicyclist, and in the back is a 6-foot white canvas that's slightly like arched, and it was just blank.
Sure.
And the whole time in my mind, I am like what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? I'm by myself. I am homeless. I have like next to no money. I don't know what I want to do for a career. Like my family is like, you're insane. My friends are like, you're crazy. So I was like, why do I exist? I'm like, why am I here? Like, what is, you're insane, Kory. So I wrote that on my surfboard. I'm like, why do you exist? And what was so cool about it is it turned into this conversation starter to where people would come up to me all the time and they'd be like, oh, what's up with this question? And I'm like, hey, I'm 22 years old. I don't know what I'm doing in my life. Like, what do you do with your life? And people would just start talking to me about their lives and like what they're up to and what gives them meaning, what gives them purpose, like what they get out of bed for. And I got like, I exist to create, or I exist for my daughter. I exist to teach. I exist to give back or to receive or to love. And that type of stuff just meant so much to me, to have some form of like general direction. And so the book is basically, I took lots of portraits of the people who responded to my question. And I have my raw journal entries that I wrote because I'm an avid writer and a journaler. And I would write out, hey, I met Dan, and Dan says he exists for this. And so the book highlights these portraits of the people I met, advice they gave me, stories of their travels in their own life, and kind of blended in with my adventure. And I worked on that for about a year after I finished it. And it was quite an emotional journey. I started the book. I stopped the book. I stopped. I was like, dude, you suck. Like, no one's going to read this. Like, why are you doing this again? And I just kept trusting this kind of internal whisper that I think a lot of us have, like the gut feeling. And as hard as it was, I would deviate away from it, and then I'd come back to the gut, and I kept pushing at it, and I'm so happy I did. And so when I published it, I posted it on my Instagram, and I ordered 20 copies. The first 20 copies sold in like a half hour, which blew my mind. Like I was mind blown. I was like, I can't believe like 20 people even want this thing from me. like what? And so that was the coolest moment ever. And then that made me just believe in what I was doing a little bit more. So I printed more copies, and I just kept selling it. And people seemed to really respond well to it. And they kept writing me more, like why they exist. And it's just turned into a really cool thing coming off of the bike ride to the book. And it's still got a life of its own. I still have copies I sell. And it's kind of like my baby that I love a lot.
Awesome, man. And I just love the thought of you like rolling down the coast on your bike, like smelly and sweaty, looking for the next wave. And then, like this such a deep question. And like I can only imagine the characters that you ran into and the stories that they had and like what was meaningful to them and why they exist,
Oh, so many. And one other like theme out of it too that I got is the blend of money and passion. It was something that a lot of people said to me was you gotta do what you like, you gotta do what you enjoy, don't do it for the money. And that was just something that I took into the book. Into the book is that I never did it to sell copies. I never did it to make money. And so having that kind of like authenticity to it without the financial pressure was something that was taught to me by all the people that I met.
Awesome.
And of course in California you get some like super hippie, raggedy, like kind of picture like Full Dread, right. Grateful Dead people, like don't do it for the money, man. That type of stuff, which was great. I loved it.
It's awesome, man. And are there any like, can you give us any either hints from the book or just thoughts from that trip and from the people you met surrounding that question, why do you exist? Like what were some of the memorable ones or like the memorable people that you met along the way?
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Ooh, I need. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no
1
worries.
second.
Grab it. And also, Kory, where can people?
Well, I
where
missed you real quick there. I turned off my headphones. Can you say that again?
Yeah, you bet. I was just saying, no worries, go for it. And also, while we're talking about it here, where can people find this book?
Yeah, so I started my own publishing company. It's called Little Cabin Press. So it's available at littlecabinpress.com, or simply if you just go to Instagram at Little Cabin Press, you guys can find Why Do You Exist available there.
Sweet.
And I had to go grab it because I just wanted to maybe I'll read one of my journal entries.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
They're pretty short and sweet. So here it is. Pedaled into a stoplight when a couple in a car ask me, "What's your answer?" I say, "No idea. I'm 23 and I need your help answering." He replies, "It's all about yin and yang. The East got it right. Give out and it will come back." I get to the top of another hill climb, sweating and exhausted. I find Scott up there waiting for me. He says, "Hello. I saw your sign and I knew I had to stop. I had to see what you were doing and who you were." He says he's also from Minnesota and he moved to Hawaii. And he never felt like home, so he moved back. I ask him to answer. He says, "I think I'm here to love, serve, and forgive. My life hasn't always been easy, and I want to give out what I wish at times I was gifted." He graciously donated to my trip. What a guy. I thank him and I pedaled on. And so
Awesome.
The whole book is just kind of little like snapshots into people like that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love it, and it sounds cool and inspiring. And I know that since we're talking about the book and hitting it here, I know that it's aesthetically pleasing as well, right? It's got some sweet photos.
Yeah, so I guess I never knew I had such a passion for graphic design until I started doing it. I didn't really know anything about Photoshop or Illustrator, but I really became obsessed with it, and I'm quite pleased with the layout. So it has all my photography that I shot on it. It's got a lot of work in Photoshop and Illustrator in there. I worked with a couple other graphic designers who helped, and it's totally kind of I tried to think a little bit about how I could take, like, in a sense, the Instagram feed and kind of like our attention span that we work with nowadays and put it into a book. So it's kind of like a blend of like a scrapbook meets social media into like, it's really fun. You can sit down and you can read it in, an hour or two, and then you can kind of come back and revisit it, because I think there's lots of hidden gems in there as well.
Awesome, man. I love it. And so going back to the trip that spawned the book, Why Do You Exist? What are some of the highlights of that trip in 2017 that you look back on now in 2020 and are like, oh man, I missed that, or like that was awesome, or just like some of the highlights that you go back to when you think about that trip?
Yeah, I think the ultimate things that I miss the most is when I was just riding the bike, I had like all my core essentials with me, and I really just tried to go at the pace that I felt like. And so I just remember all these times of just like ripping down this big hill and like feeling like the wind in my face, and just this complete sense of just freedom. Like I could go where I want. I could stop and sleep right here if I'm not feeling it. I could keep biking. And so that just highlight of like no schedule, no time, like no weekend, no days of like, our society is such a like, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like to-do list. And so that's like the highlight to me, was just this complete feeling of like freedom. And always when I biked, so I biked north to south, the whole time the Pacific was like on, so I biked on the right side of the road. The Pacific was on my right.
Right.
So I loved biking, specifically the section north of San Francisco on Highway 1, and all the windy roads, just feeling like feeling like such a boss, just on this bike, like cruising these turns and like
surfboard behind you.
Yeah, just like I feel so alive and just like vibrant. That was like big highlight is the freedom and seeing the Pacific to my right. And there were a couple days too that were like particularly memorable. One of them I biked from, this might resonate with some people, but I biked from Red Crest up Leggett Hill in California. And so if anyone's driven that section of Highway 1, Leggett Hill is like one heck of a hill climb. And before that, from like Red Crest, you climb like super gradually for about like 60 miles. And then you hit this like, and I'm kind of pulling from memory here, so forgive me. I think it's like a 20-mile hill climb at Leggett Hill or so, give or take.
Sounds brutal.
So I climbed like, it was 92 miles and it was 11,000 vertical feet. And at the time, like just as I've talked about before, I didn't look at this. I had no idea what was coming. I'm kind of one to just like, like whatever, let's go. Anyways, I did this like insane day and I was so tired. And I remember I got to like mile 85 or so and I had like 7 miles left and I was just utterly exhausted. Like I was done. I was spent. I gave it all. Like I'm sure you had some days when you were doing your trip where you remember like your you were at your physical limits and like I was like, I can't do this anymore, I'm done. And I was laying in this turnout and I was like just laying on my back looking up at the clouds and I was just like, this is insane, dude. Like your body's done. I was kind of shaking a little bit. What am I doing? Yeah, totally. And I remember I had this like overwhelming urge that I wanted someone to help me. I was like, please, a truck come up, someone come up. Like, I just need some help. Like, I need help so bad right now. Like, I'm screwed. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, I was kind of crying. And I just remember it so much that I just had this realization that sometimes in life, I was like, Kory, there's no one there to help you. And that's okay. And it's my body in a sense. It's not that my body's weak or like that, but my body can do it. My mind was what was weak and was holding me back.
Right.
And once I flipped that in my mind, I was just like, you know what, dude, like no one's here to help you. Like you got to get your ass up and out of this turnout. You got to like clench your fists and you got like 7 more miles to go to the campground. Like you got this. Like you're like, that was when I just realized like my mind controls everything.
Yep.
And I hopped up. Somehow energy came from somewhere. And I remember this vividly. I like peed a little bit and all was good. And why I'm saying this is that a little bit of blood came out. And I was like, holy shit, dude, like you are at your end. So you got to be light here. But I pushed on and I made it to camp that day. But I'll always remember the day for the rest of my life as I had this like enlightenment moment, not like complete enlightenment, but where I just realized like it's all about the mind in life.
Yep.
It's all about like where you're at in your mind space. And once your mind is really wrapped around something, and once it became deeply personal for me, like my body caught up to it in a sense.
No
and like
doubt.
I was able to do it.
Yeah, that reminds me of like the time that I came to that same realization as well. I was on a canoeing trip up in Saskatchewan with a group of guys when I was I was 16, I think, on a 30-day canoe trip in Saskatchewan through Camp Manitouish YMCA, which is just a summer camp. And we're paddling, in the middle of nowhere, Canada. The rain's coming sideways. It's cold. It's like windy. It's brutal. Everybody's hungry. I think like the day before, I had swamped a canoe. I had ran some rapids and chose a bad line and swamped our canoe, and it had like all of our kitchen stuff in it. So like some food was wet and lost some pots and pans. And then the next day it's just downpouring. And I just remember the guy, Doug Young, if you're listening, shout out to you, who I think he said, when the going, which is a common saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. and I just remember paddling in the driving rain as like a 16-year-old kid being like, shit, this guy's got to figure it out. It's like when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Like nobody's coming out here for us. Like, you know, you can either have a terrible time or you can saddle up and, you know, crush out the last 7 miles to the campground, you know?
Yes, I love that. And that's what I think, like, the concept of like going on these adventures and adventuring does is it is such a physical feat, but really those mind realizations and like like switching that flip where you're like, okay, like here we go, like this guy's got to figure it out, like I'm going to repeat this quote in my head a couple times, and then all of a sudden you just got more energy and you're crunching away.
Right.
And like those internal changes, like that's what I live for in like going on these adventures and just trying to have adventure in my day-to-day life as much as possible.
No doubt. So as you're cruising down the California coast or you know, the West Coast, you know, catching waves, camping, getting responses from people to the question, why do you exist? What are you musing on that question yourself as you're rolling down?
Okay. So I studied in school environmental science, but specifically I was obsessed with climate change. And then underneath that, I was really interested in how we can use soil to essentially sequester and pull CO2 from the atmosphere and store it into the soil as a way to mitigate the effects of climate change. So I was really obsessed with that. And putting that kind of from like a school environment where I was working in a research lab to the quote unquote real world was like a huge struggle for me. And I was so fresh out of it, you know, I was only like 4 months out of school. But as I was biking down, I was realizing that kind of interest wasn't necessarily the same way to generate an income for me immediately. And so I was like, what do I want to do that's actually like that I can actually support myself with? Because I still might return to school and visit some of that stuff. But to answer your question, is my muse was like I was really obsessed with writing. I was journaling a ton. I had a couple books with me and I was reading. And to me, like the concept of being an artist, of being a creator, of having a message to share from my words and my photos that might inspire someone else to get out there and get out of their comfort zone, or might get someone else to think a little bit differently. That's like what I was like really, really interested in. And that's what was like coming up as my theme as I was pedaling is just writing and being an artist and just having this creative freedom in my mind and putting it out into the world and sharing it.
Awesome. And how has that translated since 2017? Obviously, Little Cabin Press is up and running, and how has the adventure of starting your own publishing press gone?
Well, all right. So I laughed because, okay, how do I explain it? Here we go. Gotta reframe a little bit. So I, Kory Kirby, I'm a freelancer and I offer book design and publishing services to a wide variety of clients I'm available to hire, and I consult on projects and how do you actually publish a book, because a book is a very, very complex process, as well as I'll actually do the design. So when you open up, like you go to a bookstore and you open up a book and you go to page like 84 and you look at that page, believe it or not, there's someone out there called the book designer who specifically placed each one of those words on that page and fit the paragraphs together. That's what I do. And I'm a little bit of a freak in terms of that's what I love, because it's kind of a weird thing to love. And I don't mean to like call myself a freak. That's like, I'm working on this self-talk, but it's just kind of, it's a weird thing, you know, sure. I didn't know it was a thing. And so that's how I generate like 98% of my income currently. Little Cabin Press is just like fully the 100% the passion project. Like I don't want to put the financial anxiety on it, because I feel like once you put that something needs to like put food on the table,
sure,
it immediately changes it. And so I'm so happy that I have it currently set up. It's being set up really small, really simple, and it's like what I'm going to work on for the rest of my life. And I launched it in January of 2020. What happened in February and March of 2020?
We all know.
We all know. So I had some funding actually lined up from some generous people, and that just like vanished. I had like some money saved, and then like some client work fell through. And so immediately, like the resources I had into it just like were just kind of like vanished. And then of course, like the world shut down, and so that was really, really hard. But since like May, I've been able to just like slowly plug away at it and just slow and steady, keep grinding away at it. And to answer kind of your original question of how it's going, it's exactly where I want it to be. I have a website up that I absolutely love, that I worked hard to do. I have books in stock that are beautiful, that are high quality materials that took me a lot of work to find the right printer to get them printed for me. And I'm currently working on publishing 3 titles. I'd hope to get all 3 books done in 2020, but it's looking like those are probably going to all be released in 2021, and that's okay. So it's going great, man. Like it's ripping. It fuels my creative passion, and it allows me to sometimes, like, I'll be working on someone's book that's like a cookbook. And I love the work, but it's not necessarily like my true core passion. I would love to be working on publishing like an adventure book, and that's kind of what Little Cabin Press is about. And so having Little Cabin Press just like keeps my burnout like away. So it keeps me fired up and it keeps me stoked, and like that's the true kind of the core thing. You know what I'm saying?
No doubt about it. Yeah, that's great, man. It's awesome. And yeah, it's cool. I'm gonna have to go and order myself a copy of Why Do You Exist once we get done with this.
Yes, thank you. I love it.
Absolutely.
And it's going great. I'm learning so much too, like hiring like trademark lawyers and like talking to business attorneys and like reading books. It's in itself is an adventure.
Awesome, man. Exactly. And I love it. And that's what it's all about. Going back to the bike trip though, out of curiosity. So all the way down the West Coast, obviously that's a long way. There's a lot of topography, a lot of geography, up and down that coast. Do you have a favorite spot that comes to mind from that trip where maybe you took some times off and caught some awesome waves, or like, crashed with some cool people, or just like soaked it all in at a specific spot?
Yeah, Northern California, I think, is particularly magical because you got the redwoods, and you also have just it's pretty desolate in terms of the California. Particularly, I kind of already mentioned this, but north of San Francisco, up to about Crescent City. Crescent City is the very, very first coastal town. San Francisco to Crescent City is just that whole section. I like loved the surfing there, as well as just the interactions I had with people and the redwoods. And it's got this really magical feeling. It's kind of what I picture a lot of places were like, maybe in like the 70s or the 80s. And again, my mind is painting this picture, but it's kind of quiet. It's like set back in time. And it's really creepy, and the water is super sharky. Like it's really dangerous to surf there. So that was something I was always thinking about and really afraid of. Sure. And Crescent City, California. So I'll give you an exact answer to that question. Crescent City, California is really amazing.
Okay.
And I met a surfer there. And he surfed there his whole life. And he like showed me around a little bit, and he was really interested in my trip, and he actually is featured in the book. And he helped me kind of like handle my anxiety of the sharks a little bit because he was out there with me and helped him show me around. So that's a very special spot. Super big, like haystacks set off in the water when you're surfing. Lots of kelp, and it's a beautiful spot.
Awesome, man. It sounds awesome, and yeah, it just sounds like an awesome trip. you mentioned that you'd been down, spent some time in Mexico with rented a house with a group of folks. What was that experience like? I know you kind of touched on it with like being all housed with the creatives, but that sounds like an interesting and sweet experience too.
Yeah, so the Mexico story is great. I'm excited to tell it. So the first like 60% of it was straight up like we found an amazing Airbnb, and we essentially reached out and we were like, hey, we're a bunch of creatives. We'll go down there, and I shot real estate photos for them. Someone painted and gave a painting to the place. Someone else like rewrote the Airbnb ad, and so we gave them like this wonderful package, and we got a discounted rate to stay there. And it was a super nice place. It was like felt like kind of bougie to me, and I'm one that's like sleeping in my like sleeping pad that has like duct tape that like deflates at 3 a.m. in a tent type of
Been
person.
there.
So to be in this kind of like bougie Airbnb in Mexico I felt a little guilty, like I wasn't like being true to myself or like my life, but it was wonderful. Like it was super nice. And we surfed a lot. We worked during the day, during the heat of the day, and we'd go out and you'd have beers and dinner, and it's super cheap down there in Mexico. In the community. So I was in Sayulita, which is north of Puerto Vallarta. So I was in, a tourist community, and I was in a little bit of a bubble, of course. But my time down there, the people I interacted with, like the Mexican community, are the most amazing, lovely people, incredibly generous, just nothing but positivity. And like, they don't work that hard. They don't have like the American capitalism mentality. Like they all kind of work a couple hours and they're hanging out in good families. I just loved connecting with the community there. And I'm so excited to go back. I want to learn more Spanish. And so that first part was super easy. In all honesty, like we just stayed in this nice hotel and everything was great. And then we were like, okay, like we got to do something a little bit crazier here. All right. So what should we do? So my girlfriend Gianna and we bought a plane ticket to Baja. In Baja, Mexico, I've always been really intrigued by. So we bought a plane ticket to Baja, and then we rented a car, which renting a car in Mexico is a little bit intimidating because you there's a language barrier for one.
Sure.
And then two, you're signing this kind of like packet in another language.
Right.
And then three, you're kind of like, here's like a $30,000 car that I just signed. So it was intimidating, and the roads are not that good down there. So the whole time, like we're driving this car, it's kind of like bottoming out. And so it was a little bit anxiety ridden. So we rent this car, and all it took with me is I tried to be as minimalist as possible. Is I had one backpack and a surfboard. And of course my backpack was like, probably 30% of it was like my camera and then like my work stuff. And I had like four shirts, maybe like 3 pairs of underwear, a couple pairs of socks, like super simple. And we rent the car. We go to a Walmart and we buy like a cheap Coleman stove. We buy like a really bad tent. My girlfriend Gianna, she's like, "Oh, I'm buying a sleeping pad," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't have money for that. Like, I'm not buying a sleeping pad." Horrible idea. I should have bought the freaking $40 pad. And so then we proceed to live out of the rental car and camp in Baja for 3 weeks. And it was like the desert there just ate us up. There was a long 3 weeks.
That's funny.
Like going from like the bougie hotel to like car camping out of a rental car with gear you bought from a Walmart in a foreign country in Mexico, like turned the adventure dial like quadruple, like real quick. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no doubt.
And we surfed in the mornings. We drove around the car. Of course, there's stories like we got stuck in some places. We got lost. It got really, really hot during the days, and then we found coffee shops, and then we'd surf in the evening. And that was just a trying time. like my girlfriend and I, we were fighting a little bit just because the heat like made her blood boil, and like that was super fun, but trying.
I know what you mean. Sitting in this, shitty Walmart tent. It's 100 degrees out.
Yeah, exactly. And like no proper gear, like no pocket knife, like simple things like that, like no headlamps, just like totally roughing it. No like tarp to come up and shade.
Right.
And so that we just fully sent the Mexico experience. But again, like the community there, the people we met, they helped us out. They were lovely. And lots of Corona limes.
Cool, man.
For sure.
I love it. Curious about, you mentioned you're an avid journaler, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have a couple journals for sale on your website as well. Mm-hmm. Tell me about like your journaling experience, I guess, what it does for you, and out of my curiosity, specifically tied into adventure, but just in general, because I think it's a valuable tool that I need to do more of.
Totally. So it started for me. I did this environmental science course with the Wild Rockies Field Institute based out of Missoula, Montana.
Perfect. And
we backpacked for 60 days in the deserts of Utah, and I earned a full 15 credits in geology, biology, like environmental studies, etc. And when I was there, we did our whole course out of essentially like our own journal. And our instructors told us to do daily journals. And the whole time when I first started, I was like, this is kind of stupid. I don't want to do this. And I'm one that's super kind of, I've never been diagnosed with ADD or anything like that, but I'm like very hyper and doing stuff, and anxiety a little bit. And journaling just totally calms my mind. It slows it down. It makes me think deliberate thoughts. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. Like, this is absolutely amazing. So journaling for me is a way to slow down my mind and figure out like what exactly I want and be deliberate with then what I want. And it takes like the chaos that is our minds. I call it the mind chatter. Our mind works fast. It's always kind of like boom, 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 saying, I wish I didn't say that. Oh, I shouldn't do that. Oh, I should do this. I need to go do this or that, or, oh, I don't like my life here, or blah, 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 blah. So journaling slows all that down, and it makes it have a deliberate life. And then I can look at it and I can be like, okay, I need to do this, or I should try to work on this. And it's like a no judgment zone for me, that I can say things to paper that I wouldn't necessarily say to someone else. And it just feels good to like get something out. It feels so good. It sounds so kind of like, it might sound like cliche or whatever, but you write something out that you're struggling with. And like, for me, I always feel better. Guaranteed.
No doubt. Yeah.
Then I have you can say so. Go on.
Yeah. No, I just chimed in. Yeah, I do. I feel the same exact way. Like whenever I'm, struggling with a heavy thought, or, just thinking about which course to take or which action to take, or like what's next, like writing it out, journaling it out, thinking about it, it always helps like cut through, like you're saying, cut through the chatter. Totally. And for me, I'm always trying to be outside as much as I can. I always want to be riding my bike, surfing or skiing or skateboarding or whatever. And journaling, 100% helps me be outside more. And the greatest thing ever, I got this from a TED Talk. It's literally the greatest, most life-changing thing. All right, so if you pull out a piece of paper and you write out something that you want, and you're like, for an example, I want to canoe the Mississippi. And then underneath it, you write, what can I do today? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do this week? And then you draw an arrow to get me to where I want to go. And it's so hard because you think about a big goal like canoeing the Mississippi, or riding your bike down the coast, or working for yourself. These are huge. And the key is to break it down, and you say, well, what can I do today? All right. So for me, what can I do today to ride my bike down the coast?
I can like get up early and I can try to like buy my gear that I need or like research my gear that I need. And then I can like go to work and I can ask my boss if I can work overtime or work a double so I can start making more money. And it's like, all right, what can I do tomorrow? It's like, okay, I can like start driving like Uber or Lyft a little bit, or maybe I can like email some people to landscape on the side, or, you know, get a job at a restaurant. Like, oh, I could do that tomorrow. And like, what can I do this week? It's like, okay, I can like be consistent about those first two things.
Sure.
And then you just break it up like that. And then you just keep revisiting that journaling process. What can I do today, tomorrow, this week to get me to where I want to go? That has changed my life to do so many wondrous things, like backpack 60 days around the deserts of Utah, bike down the West Coast. I've also biked around the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. I've traveled in Mexico. I've taken so many van trips. I now work for myself. All of that shit is from those three questions.
Right. Awesome.
It's like, what can I do today? I can answer those emails that I don't want to answer. But if I answer those emails I don't want to answer, I can go surfing this weekend.
Right. Easy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it's so powerful. It's that's a good one. I'm gonna have to I have heard that before, but I'm gonna have to add it into my my routine. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss's fear setting.
Oh, I love Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, so it's a similar deal. It's helped me a few times make some big decisions. Actually, I think the Mississippi I put through the fear setting test, and I'm a little vague on all the specifics, but essentially it's if you have something you'd like to do, let's say canoe the Mississippi. Basically, what you do is you write out all of your worst fears about what could happen if you do that. So I'll say I want to canoe the Mississippi River. Worst fears: I lose my job, I can't find another job. You know, my family tells me I'm crazy. You know, whatever it is, and
totally.
you write out all of your worst fears, and then your next step is, okay, if this was to happen the way that would be the worst possible scenario, what could I do to mitigate it, and how could I get back to where I am now? And it's just like a really clear way to look at
I love that.
Being like, just do it, because it's really not that bad. Like if it doesn't work out, for the most part, you can get right back to where you were, or even better, without that much effort. Basically, is what that exercise does for me, at least, which is, I think, is helpful.
That's amazing. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss, but I actually have never heard of that. So I'm going to have to check that out. Like that. Thanks for sharing that. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, Tim Ferriss fear setting. Cool, man. Well, I really enjoyed speaking with you, Kory. I think we'll kind of wind her down here, but I guess before I do that, I am curious about your 60 days in the desert around Utah. That sounds epic and gnarly and informative and formative, I should say, for you too.
Yeah, so that was backpacking. I only had, you know, what I could carry on my back for 60 days, and that was just really special to really clear my mind, really clear kind of like social obligations in a sense. I feel like, because when I did that, I was really into just like partying with my friends and just like being in college and like always hanging out with people.
Your
and
boys.
So that was, yeah, exactly. totally. And like shotgunning beers and and so that was good to just like disconnect myself from that world at that time in my life and just be like really simple. And that's what I think about that trip is it was pure simplicity. And I found kind of a lot of beauty and joy in just like walking in the desert, and just like we talked about, like journaling and reading, and as well as I learned a lot from we spent a lot of time with Native Americans, specifically Navajo and Hopi. And I feel as if the conversations I had with some of the elders and just their wisdom about the world and like philosophies and how to live a life of meaning, how to carry yourself was just incredibly valuable. Always thinking about future generations in your decision making as much as you can. Just treating other humans how you want to be treated. Not working so hard, and just like enjoying life and enjoying nature. And those are a lot of themes that I pulled out from spending 60 days kind of in the Colorado Plateau.
Love it, man. Those are great values and tenets to live by, and I think we'd all do well if we could strive for those, right?
Yeah. And there's one specific I wanted to share. So I was
please
real
do.
quick. I did a traditional sweat with a Navajo elder, and he said that he always has told his people, do not fear the white men, for if you give them enough time, the white men will destroy themselves. And I've always thought about that in a way, in like what I'm doing to destroy our culture in a way. And that's just been like just something to really kind of like dwell on, or maybe almost end on, that they almost know that about our culture in a way. And it's just, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that. It's something I still think about. It just has a lot of meaning to it. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely.
And it's something you can chew on and try and figure out its course, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, man. Well, Kory, really enjoyed the conversation. I think there's a lot that we could even get into more. So maybe we'll chat again sometime down the line, and hope all goes well with your work and adventuring. And man, let us know where we can check you out again, and check out your books and your work.
Yeah, so I'm active on Instagram at Kory Kirby. That's KoryKirby. Got to get the Kory as a KORY.
There you go.
And then Little Cabin Press is my publishing company, my precious baby, so to say. So check out Little Cabin Press and Instagram at Little Cabin Press. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in the world. And my final thoughts, whereas a little bit throughout this conversation, I know I talked about my business and money a little bit, just because I think that to live a life of adventure, no matter what you're doing, you gotta make time for adventure. So figuring out how you fit your career goals in with trying to get out and like make joy has been something I'm really interested in. So if anyone wants to they listen to this and they're intrigued, like I love talking to people too. Shoot me a DM. I'll even like totally throw out my email. It's books@KoryKirby.com. Shoot me an email and I'd love to talk about how you fit adventure into your life with your career. Because I think it's fascinating to keep a roof over your head and then like get out a lot. Like that's what I'm really interested in, is how do you do those two things? So
awesome, man. I love it. And that's at one of the core that's at one of the core things that I'm trying to attack right now too. So it's not easy, right?
Oh God, it's hard. I'm still figuring it out. By no means have I figured it out. So if anyone has any insights, I love talking to people.
And there you have it, episode number 19 of the Buffalo Roamer podcast, officially in the books. Dunzo. Thanks so much for tuning in. Always appreciate it. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. Tell them to check out the Buffalo Roamer podcast, that they might enjoy some of the stories of adventure that we bring you each and every week. And don't forget to subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you are listening to the show currently. That would do a lot for us. Kory Kirby was the man. Really enjoyed that conversation. You can find out more about him. Go check his stuff out at KoryKirby.com. That's Kory with a K. KoryKirby.com. He's on Instagram at Kory_Kirby. Those are two good places to check him out. And then his publishing company, Little Cabin Press. You can Google that. He'll pop right up there. Go give him a shout. And if you want to reach out to me, please do. Be interested to hear what you're thinking of the show so far, how things are going. If you have some guests you'd like to see or have stories of adventure yourself, please share it with me. I'm at Buffalo Roamer on Instagram. You can email me as well, buffaloroamer@yahoo.com. All right, until next week, we are out on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast.